We are very excited to have our 5th patient-focused drug development meeting on sickle cell disease. We have done a lot of preparations, and Anne in a few minutes is going to give a welcome and do the proper thinking. But my name is Sarah Eggers, and I'll be the facilitator for today, and I just want to go over a few housekeeping and agenda items. Before I do that, I do want to have my colleagues from FDA introduce themselves. They'll be sitting up here throughout the meeting today.
My name is Ann Farrell. I'm the Division Director of the Division of Hematology Products in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research.
My name is Nicole Verdun, and I'm a hematologist and medical officer here in Dr. Farrell's office.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Roby-Sue. I'm one of the medical team leaders in the Division of Hematology Products.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Lisa Falcon. I'm a medical officer in the Division of Hematology.
Good morning. My name is Teresa Mullen, and I direct the Office of Strategic Programs in the Center for Drugs.
Good morning. My name is John Cook-Bull. I'm Director of the Office of Minority Health and the Office of the Commissioner.
Good morning. I'm Ann Pariser. I'm the Associate Director for Rare Diseases in the Office of New Drugs.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask for the agenda slide. So let me go over briefly what our day will look like today. We have a jam-packed day, and I'm happy to say that most of it is focused on listening to patients, caretakers, and advocates of people with sickle cell disease. After some opening remarks and some brief background context setting by my FDA colleagues and myself, we're going to go right into the discussion. Our first discussion topic is on the health effects of sickle cell disease that matter most to you. And we're going to start that discussion by looking at the pediatric and young adults, so people about 22 and under. And then we're going to have a discussion, the same discussion with adults about 23 and older. Then we will go to lunch, and after lunch we'll come back and have topic 2 discussion in the same format, and I'm going to go over the panel format in my talk later on, so you'll have an idea of how that will run. The second talk will be on your perspectives on treatments for sickle cell disease. Following that, after we have those 2 discussion topics, there'll be an open public comment, which will give anyone here, not just patients, but everyone, a chance to talk about other topics that may not have been within the scope of the first 2 topics. And then following that, Kathy will give some closing remarks and we will be done. This meeting is being recorded today. It'll be on the webcast, and I want to give a huge shout out to all the people who are on the webcast today. You play an important part of this meeting, and so we welcome you as well. The webcast is going to be streaming today. It will be put up, it'll be archived and posted on the website some days after the meeting. There will be a transcript, so everything's being said is being captured today, and that will also be put on our website. There are restrooms about as far away as you can be in this building, but they are just down this hallway. And then if you go to the end wall and go to the right, you'll see the restrooms. There's a kiosk where you can buy basic food, sandwiches and stuff during lunch or any time you want. And I do encourage you, if you need to get up and move around, please do so. This is a very informal setting. There's a hallway, there's some tables out there if you need to stretch your legs and walk around, or if you need to go use the restroom or get a snack. I think that's it for the agenda and housekeeping. If you have any questions, my colleagues with name tags are sitting up here and around. Just come find one of us and we will be happy to help. With that, I will turn it to Anne, who will give a few opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, and welcome to this meeting on patient-focused drug development for sickle cell disease. This is an important meeting, and we are delighted to hear today from patients about how they think about sickle cell disease. My name is Ann Farrell, and I'm the Division Director for the Division of Hematology Products in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. Previously, I was in university practice where I was a hematologist-oncologist taking care of patients with sickle cell disease. I see we have a full room today, and I would like to thank all our panelists, patients, their families and caregivers, the advocates and the numerous advocacy groups who are here today, the pharmaceutical industry, healthcare professionals, academia, NIH, CDC, and other government partners, the press, and interested observers for dealing with the recent Washington metro weather and coming to today's meeting. I would also like to thank all of those who are joining remotely via the web. I'm delighted to see a high level of interest from those of you who play a very important role in the drug development process. Thank you very much for coming here today and being part of this meeting. A major mission of the FDA is to ensure the availability of safe and effective medicines to the American public. The FDA is also responsible for advancing public health by speeding innovations that make medicines more effective, safer, and more affordable, and by helping the public get accurate science-based information that patients need to use medicines effectively. While we at the FDA are part of the process, we are just one part of the process. The FDA does not develop medicines or treatments for sickle cell disease, nor do we conduct clinical trials. CDER's Division of Hematology Products oversees the development and approval of medicines like hydroxyurea, which are used to prevent or treat the complications of sickle cell disease. While we do not develop medicines or treatments, we work with our partners to facilitate the research and development of safe and effective medicines. Could I have the next slide, please? Drug companies or manufacturers work with academic investigators and research and patients to conduct the necessary studies and clinical trials to submit applications for new drug products to the FDA. It is then the FDA's responsibility to ensure that the benefits of a drug outweigh its risks. The path a drug takes travels from the laboratory testing to your medicine cabinet can be a long period, and it may take each drug takes a unique route. Typically, this work is done through a process that involves formal application to the agency and investigational new drug application. Sponsors or manufacturers typically do initial preclinical animal testing. This is followed by manufacturers showing the FDA the results of the animal testing and making an application for human clinical testing. After considering the results of the animal studies and negotiating with the sponsor, the FDA decides whether it is reasonably safe to allow the conduct of human clinical testing with various agents. The testing in humans is a gradual process of the accumulation of safety and effectiveness data, sometimes involving different populations, different dosages, and using different drugs, sometimes in combination. During this process, the FDA will meet with sponsors on several to many occasions as they test their product to discuss the findings and the path forward, and hopefully the path to eventual approval for widespread use. How often the FDA meets with a sponsor varies. Along the way, some drugs are found to be too toxic and are never tested in humans. Other drugs are discovered to be toxic in early clinical trials and are never fully developed. When enough data has been accumulated, the manufacturer submits an application to the FDA. This is called a new drug application to the FDA. And to ask that the FDA consider approving the new drug for marketing in the U.S. The submission will contain all available animal and human data, as well as information on manufacturing. The FDA then will perform a rigorous evaluation process looking at all aspects of the drug, including the manufacturing, inspecting sites, and the clinical trial data and analysis of trial conduct, and then we'll make a decision about the application and whether the manufacturer has submitted enough information to allow the marketing, which would be the widespread distribution and sale of the product. All of us attending this meeting have different but very important roles in the development of effective treatments, from manufacturers who develop the product and perform the initial preclinical testing and work with the researchers and investigators and the agency to design the clinical trials, the patients who participate in the clinical trials of experimental therapies, and the FDA, who will eventually make a decision regarding the product. Pharmaceutical companies synthesize and manufacture agents to target those effects or identified causes of those effects. Working together with clinicians and manufacturers, develop clinical trials to test the promising agent in patients. And patients, their families, and advocacy communities engage and participate in those trials to allow the verification of the beneficial effects of the drugs and help to understand what side effects can be expected. We're very happy to be having this meeting today on sickle cell disease. As many of you know, we have a scarcity of products approved to prevent or treat the complications of this disease. Sickle cell disease is a chronic and debilitating disease that affects patients all of their lives. The treatment of sickle cell disease remains an area where there is a large unmet medical need. Hydroxyurea is not 100% effective, and transplant is not an option for everyone. Hence, we are interested in getting patients' perspective, patients' families' perspective, caregivers, and advocates' perspective on the aspects of their disease that affects their lives the most. This is an area where we really want to hear more from patients about how you experience the disease and how it affects your life, and what would like to see in a potential treatment that might be approved. Can I have the next slide? Having this kind of dialogue is very important and for us. Hearing about what you care about can help lead the way in figuring out how to best facilitate drug development for sickle cell disease. You can help us to better understand how endpoints that reflect the aspects of the disease that bother you the most can be incorporated in clinical trials to better define the benefit. And this is I'm talking about patient-reported outcomes, how you feel, your symptoms, those items that are most important to you. We hope this meeting will be the first of many successful collaborations leading to the development and approval of effective therapies for sickle cell disease. Thank you very much for your participation here today. I'll now turn it over to Teresa Mullen, who will provide the background on the FDA's patient-focused drug development. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you about this broader initiative, and we're very happy that sickle cell disease is one of the disease meetings that we're including in this initial set of 20, and we can go to the next slide. So this initiative began with FDA making some basic observations that really patients are uniquely positioned to give us a better understanding of the clinical context of the disease, and that would be critical to our benefit risk assessments of new drugs. And we would also benefit from a more systematic approach to getting that kind of input on the severity of the condition from the patient's point of view, and also the impact on their life and how they feel about the treatments that are currently available. And do that outside of the decision-making around a particular drug. Really try to do this in advance of and as a separate effort where we really just, it's all about hearing what patients think, because that would provide us a wonderful reference point for any applications that come in, including new drug investigational applications, as Dr. Farrell was describing early on in development. It would help us in a much broader way. And the mechanisms we had available before this initiative really only gave us an opportunity to get that input in the context typically of an advisory committee meeting or when a particular product was under consideration. And there are all sorts of constraints that places on our ability to get input. So we thought this was really an unmet need that we had. And so in 2012, as part of the reauthorization of the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, FDA committed to and built into our performance goals for ourselves development of a more systematic approach, and one that would allow us to get that patient perspective and inform our understanding of their view of the context of the disease, which is, after all, it's the drugs are being made for patients. They are going to experience the benefits and also the risks. So getting that input would really help us to do a better job of protecting patients and reviewing those applications. And so we committed to at least 20 diseases in different specific disease areas, and that we really view this as the first 20. We're quite honestly, we're really learning how to run these meetings, how to get this kind of input, even getting remote input and making the best use of those technologies to hear from as many people as possible. Not everyone can be here today. We're thrilled that you were able to make it to this meeting and that the people on the webcast were able to join. And so we're learning how to do this. And that's what these meetings will do, giving us this opportunity. And so how do you choose that 20? There are so many diseases where patients have told us they need better treatments. And so to come up with an initial set of 20, we developed some criteria. We asked our review divisions to consider these criteria. We put these in a Federal Register notice as well to ask for public input. And here's the set that we came up with to help us shape up an initial 20. Diseases that are chronic, symptomatic, and affect functioning and activities of daily living. Ones where there are important aspects of the disease that are not being formally captured in clinical trials today. Ones for which there are no therapies or very few therapies, and the therapies don't address all the most critical symptoms or perhaps any of them in terms of how patients feel, function, or survive. We wanted to get diseases that have reflected a range of severity across patients affected where possible to understand that better, and also look at diseases where there might be a particular subpopulation that is more affected by the disease. And finally, as a set of 20, we wanted to capture a range of diversity in terms of the size of population affected and the kinds of input that we might get. And so we came up with our initial list. It was almost 40. We published that FDA-generated list in a Federal Register notice in fall of 2012. And we had a public meeting in October of that year, and was very well attended. We received about 4,500 comments from the public docket. In those comments, 90 diseases were identified as being ones we should be considering and as of interest. And so we very carefully sifted through all this input, went back to the review divisions, talked to them about what should we focus on first here. And what we've come up with so far is 16 diseases for the first 3 years. We're going to come back and try to determine which diseases to pursue in the final 2 years of this 5-year program later on. And so on the next slide, we have the diseases that are identified so far for the first couple of years. And as you can see, sickle cell is our first disease for this calendar year. And so for each of these meetings, and looking at the range of diversity of those diseases on that slide, you can see we really need to further tailor each of these meetings to some of the particular issues and the experiences of the population of patients who are experiencing that disease. And so we have some standard questions that we'll be asking you today that we ask at each of these meetings related to the severity of the condition and your experience with it and how it's affecting your life and how the treatments available are working for you. We also bring in questions that the review divisions have asked to have included because there may be particular concerns or things that they see coming up in their reviews, and they'd like us to try to take the opportunity, the sort of unprecedented opportunity we have here, to get your input on those as well. So some of the questions or probing that we do today is to help the reviewers, and the review division staff come to these meetings to hear. It's a wonderful opportunity for them, and so we'll have questions of that kind as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we're also trying to figure out how to use technology to poll and get responses to different questions, using interactive questions for the webcast to be able to get input from those who are participating remotely as well. But common to all these meetings, we have found that patients and the caretakers and the patient advocates who come provide us with very insightful and powerful messages about what it's like to live with this disease, and really have been invaluable to us. And the stakeholder involvement, even in preparing for these meetings and planning for them and gathering the input and outreach to other patients with the disease, has been critical to the success of these meetings. And finally, what do we do with the information that we get in these meetings? Well, one thing that we will do is develop a meeting report which tries to capture very faithfully what we've heard from the patients who've come to the meeting or who provided us with input and who have sent information into the docket as well. We keep a public docket, which is an electronic docket, so people can submit comments to that as well. And we analyze all this information and really try to make sure we keep the input in the words of the patients, use the language that they use, because we don't want to try to translate it. That's really authentically with the input that we received, and that's one input. And the other, as Dr. Farrell was saying, is an opportunity for us to get a start on perhaps development of patient-reported outcome measures that can be used to help capture more information in clinical trials to see if drugs that are being tested are addressing some of the symptoms and the concerns that we've heard from patients. So that's another longer-term result that we can get from these meetings. And with that, I'll stop and I'll turn it over to our next speaker. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole Verdun, and I'm a hematologist here in the Division of Hematology Products in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. And I also have treated several patients with sickle cell disease. Many of my mentors are either in the room or participating via webcast. And so we welcome you, and we look forward to this discussion. And with that, I will get started. I have been tasked with giving a very broad overview of sickle cell disease in 10 minutes. You can feel free to laugh, because that's, of course, difficult to do, but here we are. So, next slide, thanks. So I will be giving a definition of sickle cell disease, discussing a little bit about the genetics, the complications, and treatment. So sickle cell disease truly is a global health problem, with 100,000 people affected in the United States and millions affected globally. Sickle cell disease occurs in 1 in 500 African American births and in 1 in 36,000 Hispanic births. And sickle cell trait affects 1 in 12 African Americans. Our goal here at the FDA is the development of safe and effective treatments for preventing and reducing the complications of sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease is a multi-system disease associated with episodes of acute illness and progressive organ damage. And red blood cells change to a sickled shape in the presence of decreased oxygen and inflammation. Sickled red blood cells and white blood cells then become trapped in small blood vessels, or the microvasculature. Normal hemoglobin consists of 2 alpha globin chains and 2 beta globin chains. And hemoglobin S results from a point mutation changing the 6 amino acid in the beta hemoglobin chain from glutamic acid to valine. Sickle cell anemia, or homozygous SS, accounts for about 70% of sickle cell disease. There are several other forms of sickle cell disease that result from a co-inheritance of hemoglobin S with other abnormal beta chains. So for example, sickle cell disease SC, S beta 0, S beta plus, SO-ARAB, and SD. There are significant differences in severity and complications that are somewhat attributable to genes and the type of sickle cell disease. So, for example, sickle cell disease SS and S beta 0 has a different phenotype than SC and different from S beta plus. But even within the same family or mutation, there are differences that exist. We do know that it can be co-inheritance of other genetic factors that modulate the disease, such as alpha thalassemia and the hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin. There are many sickle cell disease complications that can occur as early as infancy and continue through childhood and adulthood. And this is a not comprehensive list, but does list several of those complications. Some of them are a direct result of the disease, and others are a consequence of needed therapies, such as iron overload. Recurrent episodes of blood vessel occlusion and tissues not getting enough oxygen can result in progressive damage involving most organs. So the bones with complications such as avascular necrosis, the lungs can have restrictive lung disease over time, hepatopathy, kidneys, brain, retinopathy, cardiovascular system problems. Chronic hemolysis can result in varying degrees of anemia, jaundice, fatigue, gallstones, delayed growth and sexual maturation, and progressive damage to blood vessels. And increased rates of hemolysis can predispose people to pulmonary hypertension, priapism, and leg ulcerations. One of the most common causes of stroke in children is sickle cell disease, and damage to blood vessels in the brain can start in infancy. Some people can have a progressive vasculopathy with recurrent strokes despite a transfusion program. Silent brain infarcts are recognized to have problems with neurocognitive deficits. Intracranial bleeds can begin in the 20s and 30s with a moya-moya-like syndrome, cerebral aneurysms. Treatment is largely neurosurgical and limited in its scope and its ability to have an effect. Acute chest syndrome is a form of acute lung injury with significant morbidity and mortality associated, and it's the second most common cause of hospitalizations in sickle cell disease outside of acute pain crises. People with sickle cell disease can have chronic damage to blood vessels in the kidney that can start at a very early age, and adults can develop chronic renal failure and require renal transplants. Sickle cell disease can also affect pregnancy. The manifestations can vary. Some people with sickle cell disease will have an increase in acute painful episodes, an increase in the risk for thrombosis or clot formation, infectious complications, cardiac complications, and low birth weight. The current treatment paradigm for sickle cell disease is a combination of preventive and supportive, with each patient falling a little bit different in terms of where they are and for prevention versus supportive based upon what's available for their individual disease. Hydroxyurea was FDA approved in 1998 with an indication to reduce the frequency of painful crises and to reduce the need for blood transfusions in adult patients with sickle cell anemia with recurrent moderate to severe painful crises. The uses for hydroxyurea continue to grow in scope and are much broader than the indication. It works very well for some to decrease complications and has actually been shown to increase survival. The mechanism of action is not completely understood. Several people have an increase in hemoglobin and a reduction in hemolysis. There's an increase in hemoglobin F production, which allows red blood cells to live longer. Decreasing inflammation has been seen, and dilation of the blood vessels as a result of nitric oxide metabolism. Other preventive treatments that are commonly used are penicillin prophylaxis, timely immunizations. The pneumococcal vaccine has really revolutionized infections in sickle cell disease. The influenza vaccine is very important. Folic acid is often used due to increased red blood cell turnover. Chronic red blood cell transfusion therapy can be indicated for some patients. All of the indications are beyond the scope of this talk. And although not a treatment, ongoing education of caregivers and patients is essential. And a lot of surveillance is done, transcranial Doppler ultrasounds, echocardiograms, eye screening, urinalysis, et cetera, and monitoring for growth and development. Stem cell transplantation can be curative, but there are significant risks during and after transplant that have traditionally limited its use to those with significant complications. There are also problems with finding matched donors. Continued improvements in immunosuppression and the management of transplant-related complications are ongoing, and the criteria for consideration of a transplant are constantly changing. I had to mention some of the limitations of the preventive treatments that are used. For example, chronic transfusion therapy, although effective for some, you can have problems with iron overload, antibody formation, transfusion reactions, and infections, which limit their use in some patients. And hydroxyurea, although a wonderful drug for several people, is not universally effective. There's laboratory monitoring that's required. You can have myelosuppression, and it can be harmful during pregnancy to an unborn baby. So we really do need further development of safe and effective treatments for sickle cell disease. Treatment of complications is often a combination of antibiotics, blood transfusions may be indicated in the acute setting, surgery. Pain crisis management is largely supportive with a combination of hydration management, oxygen, anti-inflammatory agents, and pain medications. And acute chest syndrome management is also quite supportive. So we really are here at the FDA interested in continuing to switch the treatment paradigm from supportive to preventive or curative. So what is the future of sickle cell disease treatment? Well, there's several clinical trials that are in the planning stages or in process, but it really is not enough. We really do need more development to have the global impact on sickle cell disease that we need and that we feel is overdue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole and Anne and Teresa. It's my pleasure to get the discussion started. I'm going to go over a few basic things about what our discussion will look like today and to put you all at ease about how the day is going to run. Have the next slide, please. As we have our two topics, we've gone over those a bit today, but I'll just briefly go over those again. The first topic is the health effects that matter most to you. And by you, I mean patients. And if you're here as a caretaker, if you can speak on behalf of your loved one, what matters most to the person who lives with sickle cell disease. We're going to discuss the pediatric and young adults first, and then we'll have a separate discussion on adults. So during the pediatric discussion, adults, please stay silent. And then during the adults, we'll ask the pediatric and caregivers to be in listening mode as well. Hopefully you'll learn a lot. We want to know what the specific ways that sickle cell disease affects your health. We want to hear about your average days with no acute pain crisis and your worst days when a pain crisis hits. And we're going to split those two topics up a little bit. Then in the afternoon after lunch, we'll come back and talk about your perspectives on the treatments that Nicole just described. What are you doing to treat your disease? That includes those prescription treatments that she mentioned, but also the range of other lifestyle, other therapies that you do to try to manage your condition. How well do these treatments work for you? What would you look for in an ideal treatment? And what might you think about if you had a chance to participate in a study for an experimental new treatment? So for each of those topics that I just discussed, we're going to first hear from a panel of patients and caregivers. And the purpose here is really to set a good foundation for our discussion. We've asked each of the panel members to give 2 to 3 minutes of their story. Now we all know that our stories could take hours to tell, but we've asked them to limit it to 2 to 3 minutes, and I'll nudge them along if they start to give a little bit more than that. But they are all very willing, and they're happy to oblige so that we can get to our facilitated discussion. And that's the discussion where I'll come out and more talk show style, engage the rest of you in the audience, those who have sickle cell disease, care for someone with sickle cell disease, or an advocate of sickle cell disease patients. The purpose here is to build on the experiences that were shared by the panel. So we're going to ask a series of questions and invite you to raise your hand to respond. And we have Andrea and Saugenia will be coming around with microphones. This is very talk show style. It's quite novel for FDA. So we're going to invite, please raise your hand to respond. We have a huge crowd today, and I love to see that. Makes a little bit of a challenge to try to get to everyone, but we will. We'll try to do our best to, if you want to contribute, to let you do so. Please state your name before answering so that we can capture that. You just need to state a first name. That's fine. You'll also have a chance to answer polling questions, and here I'm talking about the people on the web as well as the people in person. And I'm going to ask the little clickers that we're going to use in person to be handed out. So if you are a patient or a patient caretaker, please raise your hand, and we're going to have these little clickers come out. We're going to practice in a bit on how to use these. You just have to click the button to respond to the right answer. On the web, it's a little bit easier for you, I think. There's Adobe on your webcast. You'll be able to click on the response that you want. Sometimes you'll have to scroll down because the responses won't always fit on the screen. So just scroll so you see all the possible choices. So web participants, you can also add comments through the webcast. And although we won't be able to read all of the webcast comments today. But we will summarize those as best we can. They are important. We review all of them, and we will incorporate them into our report. We'll occasionally go to the phones to give you another opportunity to contribute to on the web. The phone line information will be provided on the webcast screen at the right time. Okay. You can also send us your comments. We very much want to hear what you have to say. If you're not if you have friends who weren't available to join in the meeting, have them send a comment. If you heard something today that really you want to comment more about, you want to describe in more detail, please send in a comment. If you want to describe your story like the panelists are, your full story, please send in a comment. We review all of them. They're very important to us. The comments will be included in our summary report. And I've just shown the website here that you can visit to go find it. It's on our meeting web page. And if you click on the Comment Now button, it will take you to a spot that you can upload your comment. Okay. There are a few ground rules that we have to make sure the discussion is as beneficial as possible and as fair as possible. We very much encourage patients to contribute to the dialogue. Caretakers and advocates, you are very welcome to contribute as well. I hope you feel comfortable to contribute. You're in company of your fellow patients and in people who are who find drug development for sickle cell disease very important, so please feel free to contribute. FDA is here to listen. My colleagues are up in the front, and I know we have other FDA colleagues scattered in the room. Because we're in listening mode, we probably can't answer all the questions that you may have for us. There are a number of other topics. If we can't answer a question, we won't be able to answer very many questions. And in that case, if you want to put your question in the docket comment, we might not be able to answer that directly either, but at least we know what questions you have and what things you want us to be thinking about and addressing when we talk to you in the future. Our discussion today will focus on health effects and treatments. We know that there are many issues related to the care and support of people with sickle cell disease. And this doesn't mean that these issues aren't important. We do want to focus on the things that FDA can really manage and think about as we continue our role in drug development. There is an open public comment period, and if you haven't signed up already, you can sign up at the registration table. It's first come, first serve, so if it's filled up when you run a register, again, that public docket, send us that comment with your comment, with your thought on another topic too. We will be glad to read those. The views today expressed here are personal opinions, and we want to respect everyone's personal opinions and know that they are each individual person's. So maybe you hear something that doesn't quite reflect what you think about sickle cell disease. Just remember that's their personal opinion. And of course, respect for one another is paramount. Also, let us know how we're doing. There are some evaluation forms at the back, and we find those important. They will really help us as we continue to improve on our patient-focused meetings. With that, I think we get to go into some of the clicker questions. I want to remind you, these clicker questions are going to be some demographic questions and then later on some discussion questions. And they are not scientific this is not a scientific survey that we're doing. This is just to aid in discussion. It's completely voluntary, but again, we encourage you, it's anonymous, we encourage you to contribute to the polling questions. If you need any more clickers, just let us know at the front. Can we go to the first clicker question? Okay, the first one's easy, we hope. It's where do you live? Do you live within the Washington, D.C. area, including our suburbs? You would click A if you're in the room. You click A on your clicker. And on the web, you just hit the right choice. Or do you live outside the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area? I see we still have some clickers going around, so I'm going to give a few minutes. And I will say there are some empty chairs toward the front over here. If you're a patient representative and you want to move up, that does make it easier for us to see you if you raise your hand to participate. So feel free. Okay, let's go to the responses. If you missed that first one, it's our least important question. Okay, so it looks like 2/3 of you came from out of the area. It's difficult to travel around DC if you live in the area, but if you came from outside of the area, our special thanks. Okay, the next one, please. Okay, which of the following best describes you? Choose all that apply. A, I have sickle cell disease. B, I am a family member or caretaker of someone with sickle cell disease. C, I work for a sickle cell disease patient support or advocacy organization. D, I'm a healthcare professional who works with sickle cell disease patients, and other. And while you're getting that, let me just remind you, I'm sure not all of the healthcare providers, professionals, and advocates got a little clicker. Don't worry, this is not going to be seen as the be-all, end-all of who's in the room. Okay. Can we go on? Okay. So does this give us the numbers at all? Okay, that's fine. We have a lot of people here who have sickle cell disease and so many family members and advocates. It's just wonderful to see you. We're going to be doing a lot of applauding today, I think. I have a feeling. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Now for the rest of these, we really just want the patients and caretakers. And by caretakers, I mean someone who's here on behalf of someone who has sickle cell disease. They aren't here and they aren't answering for themselves. So if your son or daughter is here answering for herself, please don't answer the polling questions. Okay. So what is your age or your loved one's age? 0 to 5, B 6 to 12, C 13 to 17, D 18 to 22, E 23 to 49, or F 50 and greater. Okay. Great. We have, it looks like we have a diversity in the younger ages. We split those out because we wanted to know a little bit more in detail the ages. A lot of adults 23 to 49, but I want to give a special shout out to the folks 50 and greater. It is fantastic to see you here. Pujita, can I have on the web, do we have? Or James?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we actually have some similar numbers for ages, except we have a little bit higher for 23 to 49. We're almost 60% of the participants. And then we have about the same, about 27% for 50 or greater.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on. Okay, is your loved one male or female? Okay, we won't give as much time for this one. Okay, a two-third female and 1/3 male. And on the web, similar? Mm-hmm. It's similar on the web. Okay. Where do you or your loved one receive most of your sickle cell care? A, at a sickle cell treatment center with a hematologist. B, not at a sickle cell treatment center, but with a hematologist. C, a primary care center, for example, a pediatrician or family medicine. D, only in emergency rooms and hospitals as needed. Or E, you're not sure. And we're asking you to choose just one in this case. Okay? Okay, at a sickle cell treatment center. So it looks like we have a mix of everything. Most people are treated by a hematologist in the room. Similar, and it's similar on the web. Okay, I think, yes. I think this is the final one, if not. In the past year, how often have you or your loved one had to go to the hospital or the emergency room because of sickle cell disease? A, no times in the past year. B, 1 to 2 times. C, 3 to 5 times. D, 5 to 10 times. Or E, more than 10 times. And this is just approximate numbers. Okay, so we've had, looks like, again, a mix of experiences with those who are fortunate enough to not have to go to the hospital very often, but we are also represented by those of you who do go to the hospital quite often. I'm going to ask, I forgot to ask at this point, but can I ask the panel members to come up, the pediatric panel members, so that would be Nancy, Dawn, Andrea, and Alana, if you're here. Okay. Are there any more polling questions? Okay.
So, well, just to
Yes.
note a difference on the web, you do see a similar spread, but then for more than 10 times, a quarter of the web participants.
Okay, I don't know if you all heard that, but a quarter of the participants on the web have been to the hospital more than 10 times. So those of you on the web who are in that position, your input is extremely valuable. Okay. Okay. So we are ready to begin our first topic. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves as we go along. And they have come up that we have 3 caretakers and 1 person living with sickle cell disease. And they are going to be speaking on the pediatric perspective of the effects of sickle cell disease that matter most to you. If I can have the next slide. Nancy, Andrea, Dawn, and Alana. I don't know if you're in that right order, but that's okay. And if we can go to the next slide. What we've asked them to do is to talk about, to give us, again, that brief summary of the ways that sickle cell disease affects their health, the 1 to 3 things that matter most to them, how sickle cell disease affects life on an average day, and how it affects life on the worst days, and what worries you most about how sickle cell disease could affect your health in the future. So with that, let's start with Nancy. Oh, and push your little red buttons.
Good morning.
Good morning, Nancy.
First of all, I'd certainly like to thank the FDA for selecting sickle cell disease as the topic of this patient-focused initiative. I know a lot of us are very excited by this event. I'm the grandmother of a 10-year-old boy, Joseph, who lives with sickle cell disease. I'm also the chair of the board of directors of the Sickle Cell Disease Foundation of California. The greatest impact of sickle cell disease. In December of 2003, Joseph was 9 months old. He had just celebrated his first Christmas and was reaching those milestones every parent looks for. He was interacting with his family and pulling himself up to hang on to the furniture. All that good progress stopped. He started crying and refused to eat or drink. His mom and dad realized that he was having his first sickle cell crisis. His parents rushed him to the hospital, and although he was under a doctor's care, Joseph had a stroke when he was 9 months old. It left him partially paralyzed on his right side. He now walks with a severe limp and has difficulty grasping things with his right hand. He's on regular blood transfusions and had his spleen removed last year. He learns well, but his speech has been affected by the stroke and he's hard to understand. On an average day, Joseph has a hard time keeping up with his peers physically. He cannot run, climb, or play ball like the other kids do. Many times, Joseph gets tired during family activities like going to the beach, walking, or hiking. Sometimes he can't even keep up with Granny. On the worst days, Joseph had several very bad pain episodes. A child who's generally happy and curious began to slow down and ache with pain. He would become so weak that he couldn't manage the stairs in his house, couldn't climb into bed. Although he was taking morphine, he was so weak and in so much pain that he simply couldn't move. As his blood counts dropped, it was decided to remove his spleen. For many of you, I know this is a familiar story. I know Joseph would like to take part in team sports. It's hard to watch from the sidelines or be ignored by the other children. Whenever I pick up Joseph from school, the other kids are running around the track, and Joseph is limping after them or sitting on a bench. Currently, he's getting great treatment from his hematologist and nurse at Kaiser, who see him every 6 weeks for exchange transfusions. Their experience has made a real difference in his life. The family trusts them and knows that we're working together with the medical team. Not every family can get this kind of expert care. In infants and newborn, screening has really made a big difference, and it's good that his parents knew that Joseph had sickle cell disease because they were able then to understand what that first crisis was all about. Luckily, Joseph only has to go for his transfusions once every 6 weeks, so he doesn't miss a lot of school. And of course, he missed when he had his spleen out. But school issues are a problem for other children when they have to miss more often and always get caught up in the makeup assignments. But I want to say that since this is the FDA, thinking about these problems has given me new insights. If there were a drug that stopped a pain crisis in its tracks, children wouldn't miss so much time from school. Young adults could spend more time in college and beginning those first jobs. A drug that could stop or reverse the damage a stroke can cause would really help children like Joseph. A safer drug for pain control would be key to effective treatment and keep many out of the ER. And of course, a drug that prevented red blood cells from sickling and causing organ damage would be seen as a cure. According to data gathered by the CDC in California, 50% of people with sickle cell disease die before they are 50 years old. I don't want that to happen to Joseph. I hope that the interest by the FDA and the development of new and effective medications will help improve the lives of those with sickle cell disease. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And we have Andrea next. Push your red button, yep.
Good morning. I'm Andrea Williams, and I'm the founder and executive director of Children's Sickle Cell Foundation, but for today's conversation, I'm Jonathan's mom. Thank you for the opportunity to share some insights from the parent perspective on the effects of sickle cell disease that matter most. As a mother of a 13-year-old boy, I'm faced with the realities of this debilitating, often fatal disease. Jonathan is living well with sickle cell while we hope and wait for a cure. It is my hope that as I share today and we share in this event, that we learn from what we do here in the coming report to be enriched and empowered by the voices of patients and families. My son had acute chest syndrome 8 times from the time he was 2 years old until we started him on hydroxyurea at 6. Since starting hydroxyurea, he's only had 1 episode of acute chest syndrome, recently as this past December. He has experienced sickle cell pain crisis more when he was younger, from 10 months to 6 years. These unpredictable, severe, painful episodes have interrupted his education. Missing days of school at a time, he missed critical building blocks that caused him to have difficulties reading early on. We were able to provide him with a professional tutor who worked with him, and he began reading proficiently in the 4th grade. Jonathan still has trouble concentrating at school and has a 504 support plan in place to assist him in succeeding academically. Other aspects of the 504 plan include having him seated near the teacher so that he may be redirected easily if he gets distracted or off task. He has an elevator pass and door-to-door transportation to assist him with getting to and from school and to and from class. We are proactively addressing the areas where sickle cell disease affects his daily life by managing the areas where he has the most difficulty and by preventing sickle cell pain crisis by avoiding the triggers that usually cause the pain. His participation in outdoor activities is limited when it is cold. He finds this frustrating when the weather is borderline and he's told to stay indoors. This can be difficult for any teenager, but it's more so for Jonathan because his passion is basketball. He tells me that he wants to be the first NBA point guard with sickle cell disease. I tell him I want him to be the one that used to have sickle cell disease. He loves to play basketball in the backyard daily, and when the weather changes in Pittsburgh, we have to place time restrictions and sometimes complete restrictions on him for this. At times, he perceives this difference as a weakness because he can't do what he loves for as long as he would like. So we work on this perception, treating it as an adjustment that must be made so he can do what he loves and stay healthy doing it. He is very in tune with his body and his limitations. He even knows the difference between sickle cell pain and other pain, so from muscle soreness from working out or injury. During pain crisis, whether at home or hospitalized, Jonathan describes this as an annoyance that once again has interrupted his life. Sickle cell has interrupted it with pain, fever, or an infection. The pain can be anywhere in his body, but usually in his back or his limbs. The severity ranges from mild, dull aches to sharp and excruciating pain, but until it's well managed, it can be difficult to perform the task of daily living. What worries me most about how sickle cell disease could affect Jonathan's health in the future is that a cure won't come in time, and that the more severe complications of having sickle cell disease will begin to affect him, or that he may start to experience the side effects of hydroxyurea. Of the many different complications that can happen during adulthood, I tend to worry about pulmonary hypertension the most because he has had so many episodes of acute chest syndrome. They are all very scary. When I looked at the list that she put up this morning, I cringed in my chair like, yeah, I'd want to forget about those, but you can't forget. That's why we're doing all we can to preserve his health now while he's still very young and very healthy. This disease is not only physically devastating, but emotionally draining for the child and the family. The unpredictable nature of sickle cell disease weighs heavily as we make plans for vacations, holidays, and more. We address every situation on a case-by-case basis and live our lives knowing that we're doing the best that we can by getting him the best care, taking his medications, and teaching him to understand his body and limitations. A few months ago, Jonathan said to me, "Mom, I sometimes forget that I have sickle cell until you remind me to take my medicine." In that moment, I smiled because I knew that we were on the right track. However, I couldn't share with him that I never forget. I don't forget the pain of watching him writhe in pain, of watching him in his early hospitalizations for acute chest syndrome or others. The idea that sickle cell disease that is affecting our lives even when we can't see it. I remain hopeful that there will be better treatments. More effective drugs and a cure. When Jonathan was born, I was told that a cure could come in his lifetime, maybe even in the next 20 years. And we're 13 years in, and I'm looking forward to getting on to that. Looking forward to contributing in any way we can to find a cure for this dreadful disease. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. These are hard stories to share, and we appreciate it. Dawn?
It's hard to follow. Let her go first.
Yes, Alana, can you go first? And nice to meet you, Alana.
Okay, I'll try to follow that. I'm Alana, and I'm 23, and I am living with sickle cell. First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming.
You know what? I'm going to suggest something. While we let the panelists, this is very emotional, we have a polling question. And I'm going to ask to put up that polling question.
I wasn't expecting that.
Because what we want to know in the panel, we've heard a lot about a lot of these symptoms. Let's put this up and have you start to think about it. If you want to start to answer it, you don't have to answer it now. It's going to be up here. You can put your choices in. What we want to know about is for those pediatric and young adults, other than acute pain crisis, because we imagine that would be one of your top most significant health effects. So putting that aside for the minute, what health effects of sickle cell disease currently have the greatest impact on your child's life, or if you're the adolescent answering on your own, on your life? Please choose up to 3 effects. And while you think about that, I'm gonna let Dawn start her comments.
One good thing about being here is that I'm a mother of a sickler. She's 16, but I realize being here that I'm not a crazy person, that there are a room full of people that feel exactly the way that I do. And so it's actually comforting to be here to know that I'm not alone in the way that I feel. As we're sitting here, my daughter's, we live in Michigan, and she goes to a boarding school. She's in 10th grade, and she's actually having a pain crisis, and my husband is taking her to the hospital as we speak. And so this is very important for me to be here. And while I feel like I should go back home, I think this is important. She would want me to be here. All of that I'm going to say are her answers, and I'm just going to, I told her I would represent her well. So, she wanted to come, but she's already missed a week and a half of school since Christmas, and I told her that would not, I can't explain her leaving school for anything other than health reasons, even to come to a meeting on sickle cell. So when asked the question, of all the sickle cell diseases that affect your health, which 1 to 3 effects have the greatest impact? I could give my answer, but I'm going to give you Maya's answers. She said nausea. Maya takes 1,500 milligrams of hydroxyurea every day, which is a life-saving thing for us. She was hospitalized over 60 times. She has been in her life. And since she's been taking hydroxyurea since 2005, we've gone from being in the hospital 7 or 8 times a year to about 1 or 2 times a year. So she would say that nausea is her biggest debilitating symptom, as well as chronic leg and arm pain. And she has chronic fatigue, which is often confused with laziness, but I'm happy to hear today that that's one of the symptoms that's up there, so I can stop getting mad at her. And so when asked what are the activities that she can't do, she answers this. She does not participate in physical activities like other kids her age. She experiences instant fatigue that may lead to a pain crisis. Other activities that are limited are swimming, unless the water is 84 degrees. I've had swimming pools change the temperature to 84 degrees just so she could learn to swim. Any kind of manual labor, raking leaves. Because of the intermittent nature of sickle cell, her concentration during prolonged schoolwork can be a problem. I'm actually going to do a research project soon on hearing loss and fatigue in sickle cell patients. Frequent breaks are often necessary. Playing in the snow is definitely out of the question, and we live in Michigan. I really could go on, but I'm sure many of you could too. I'll go to the next question. When I asked her, how does sickle cell affect your life on the worst days, such as days when you have a pain crisis or are hospitalized? Guess what her answer was? It surprised me, and I checked up on her just last week to make sure this is still her answer. Maya feels that the anticipation of going to the hospital, the anticipation of the pain crisis, and the enormous amount of back work that she will have when she gets back to school. She missed, as I told you, a week and a half of school in January, and she just started to cry. It was so overwhelming, and I had her write down all of her work so that her algebra teacher could see it. She'd missed about 5 tests, 10 quizzes, and I said to the school, we have a 504 plan, you know, this is the law, you have to help me with this. But for her, she says, I'm going to the hospital this weekend, Mom, and I'm going to take my work with me. I said, no, you're not. You need to get better. They just need to deal with this. It's not a choice that they have. But I said, are you sure it's not worse than the pain? She said, no, they have medication for the pain. That back work is what really gets her, and of course the social issues that we could all speak about. Maya feels that when a pain crisis is brewing, she's very edgy, she's very nervous, she's very tearful, and it's been brewing for a while. There are also social consequences with the hospitalization. She's in boarding school, as I say. When she returns to school, her friends have moved on with life. Who you went to the cafeteria with last week, they found another friend to go with this week. She's constantly trying to stay up with those friendships and stay in the loop. Are there activities that she can't do? Her answer was this. She reported that she'd like to be able to ski, to snowboard, hike, swim in a lake. She does not like to be an indoors person. She'd like to be an outdoors person. However, they would evoke a pain crisis. When Maya was a little girl, 4 years old, she fell at a skating rink, a roller skating rink, and her arm turned black and blue. And all the other mothers said, why are you catering to her? Everybody falls at a skating rink. But I knew that blood-curdling cry was a little bit different, and that turned into a 2-week hospitalization for Maya, because a mother reported to me when she played with her kids at home that there's something wrong with Maya's arm because she won't catch the ball. She won't use that arm. She had fallen at the skating rink. When she was in gymnastics as a child, she did a forward roll like all the other children during the second class. I'd already paid for it, and her back started to hurt the next week. To this day, she will not skate or do other strenuous physical activity. So I would say that avoidance is her method of pain reduction. In the future, when asked what worries her most about sickle cell disease, she says that she worries most about having a healthy baby, getting cancer, or dying early. That's very painful to hear your 16-year-old say that. So I just confirmed that with her, and her answer hadn't changed. What specific concerns do I have did I have about her? And when she was a baby, some of them you've already stressed. Not knowing when she was in pain or distress. You'd have to wait until she started to limp or something like that. I was also very afraid of fevers, even though she took penicillin. I'm a college professor, so anytime I know that she's going to get sick, I know that my entire schedule for the next 2 to 3 weeks is going to be messed up, and I can't answer emails and that kind of thing. And so I really like to talk to some other mommies around here. And so I don't know how everyone else does it. As an adolescent, what are we worried about? Maintaining social relationships is really a big one, as I said before. Getting the transition between reminding her to take her medication to now her transitioning to reminding herself to take her medication, and training her to listen to her body and to know when back work is not as important as taking care of that, taking a day off of school. I now begin to worry about depression. She had a breakdown on Sunday. I'd never seen her as dismayed in my life. Her eyes were glazed over with pain. Worrying about her future, transitioning from a pediatric wing to an adult wing. So I'm going to be very anxious to hear from the adult patients here. It's a fear of mine, but I guess I have to face my fear, which is why I took a plane to come here. In older adulthood, she worries about organ failure, premature death, people believing that her pain isn't real, and providing adequate pain management. When we've been hospitalized outside of Michigan, getting people to give her enough of a drug has been a big problem. And I'm like, don't just give her enough medication. I need you to kill that pain, you know. But when I'm in Michigan with my doctors, they believe I could call them from here and say, hey, Maya's going to show up today at 3 o'clock, and they believed me. So those are some of the issues that we face, and I look forward to hearing from everyone else.
Thank you very much. We'll be getting into the topics on treatments in the afternoon, so let's everyone remember what's been said. And finally, we have Alana.
I'll try to keep it unemotional.
You're okay.
Listening to your story.
You're okay, honey. You're okay. Just tell it. Yours is the most important story.
I still wasn't expecting to be this emotional.
Let's give her a round of applause.
This is why I don't wear makeup, Mom. Hearing your daughter's story, I feel like it's mine. At 23, I'm still going through the same things. My average day consists of now of a level 7 of pain, at least. There's this constant pain I can't get rid of. Tuesday night, after speaking to Sarah on the phone, I went into a pain crisis. Having to take 15 milligrams of morphine just so that I could sleep for at least 2 hours. I haven't slept through the night since I was in elementary school, and I'm 23 right now. It's difficult to have to live with this pain every day. And your average day is your worst day sometimes, most of the time. I wish that I could. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you. It's just, this is the first time I don't feel alone. Seeing everyone and hearing everyone's stories. I wasn't expecting to be this way. I had this big speech planned and it so did not turn out the way I thought.
Alana, could I say one thing that you told me in your thing? So I think, correct me, you have completed your bachelor's degree, and you've completed your master's degree in education of some sort?
Adolescent education.
Adolescent education.
Before my 23rd birthday.
Wonderful.
And what Alana told me, what she wants to hear, she can't wait to hear the adults speak today. What she told me is that she doesn't know how she's scared coming out of school. She's finished school. She has her degrees. How is she ever going to be able to actually live up to those degrees and have a job and be able to function in her day? So I'm going to say that one of your summary for you because
Thank you.
I think that's a very important part, and I personally want to commend you for finishing school.
Amen. Thank you.
Is there anything else, Alana, that you want to say, or would you like us to go to the discussion?
I just want to say thank you for coming. You guys look so beautiful.
Let's give Alana a thank you. And I'm going to ask you guys to stay up here. You're still part of the discussion. Is that a microphone over there? Do we have a floating mic for?
Oh my God, there's a microphone in front of me.
Okay. Is that okay? So now we're going to have the facilitated discussion. I'm going to come around to the front if I can find that there's a microphone for me. that we're not professional talk shows up here. So so bear with us as we go through. I'm going to let my colleagues ask some questions as you need, and you feel free to join. I have to actually stand this way. Sorry, I need to be able to see this this alarm clock over here. It's the only thing that keeps me on any kind of track. Okay, can I have a raise of hands of who's a caretaker or a young person in the audience today? Raise your hands. Be proud. Okay. All right, great. We're going to be focusing on you for this morning's discussion. And I truly want to thank all the panelists. It takes a lot of courage to be up here. And so a very sincere thank you. What we wanted to do is now listen more, let you build on Alana and Dawn and Andrea and Nancy's stories. And we wanted to put up a polling question that would help us get a sense of what you think are the most significant effects of sickle cell disease on you or your loved one. So we put up this question, and we wanted to know, was chronic pain, that's an A if you haven't selected yet, B, multiple infections, C, stroke, D, acute chest syndrome, E, growth problems or a delay reaching puberty, F, priapism or painful erections, G, problems with the spleen, H, difficulty concentrating, or I, something that's not listed here. There are a number of other symptoms. We couldn't capture them all. So if you could take a moment and pick up to 3, and raise your hand if you need a clicker. And on the web, I hope that you're answering as well. Okay. Is everyone ready? Okay, can we go to the results? Okay, lots of others. Okay, we'll get to those. So I know this is extremely hard to see, and my bifocals aren't doing me justice right now, but it looks like the number one thing at 46% of you in here is difficulty concentrating. We're going to delve into that a little bit. Chronic daily pain, I think we've heard a little bit about that. And then D, acute chest syndrome. Okay, so let's go into those topics a little bit more. Let's start with the difficulty concentrating. We heard that, I think, Dawn and Andrea, you talked about it, and Nancy, you talked about it, I think, some. Does anyone else want to share some specific way how you would describe what effect difficulty concentrating has on your child or you in school or in some other reason? Raise your hand and we'll come to you. Okay, over here. And if you could just state your name.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Velvet, and I am from Oklahoma. I am a social worker, and I have a 9-year-old son who was diagnosed with sickle cell in 2004. And since his birth, Jeremiah has had a significant difficulty in retaining what he learns in school. He has an IEP, and he had significant problems with reading and language development. He's had 3 sets of tubes put in his ears, and even after having the tubes placed in and his hearing restored, he still struggles in speech. He's been in speech since he was 2 years of age, and he's in the 3rd grade now. And what I am hoping is that there can be some drugs that maybe deal with the difficulties in the cognitive abilities of the patients. I wake up every day wondering what's going to happen to him if he cannot maintain what he's learning in school. How will he be able to sustain a job or graduate from school, or even when you look at college? He takes tutoring. we have him in everything that we can think of. But most of the days after school, the only thing he wants to do is take a nap. We recently learned 2 years ago that Jeremiah lung function was at a 72%. So he had major problems with his lungs. When he was born, he'd had 4 pneumonias, 2 ileuses. And we kept kind of wondering what was going to happen. His lung function had never dropped. When we found out that his lung function had dropped, they took him out of gym. And the only thing he wanted to do was be normal. He says, "Mommy, I hate this disease." And he says, "I don't want to die." And I said, "I understand that, and we're working to do everything we can to keep you healthy." He's on 5 liters of oxygen at night, and consistently we are working to maintain him getting educated. And so there needs to be drugs to deal with the lung issues and concentration, and there needs to be a concentrated focus on education for individuals with sickle cell disease.
Thank you. Thank you. Jeremiah's mom, I didn't get your first name? Velvet. Thank you. How many of you with the pediatric perspective, or even as adults, that was a problem for you, the concentration and difficulty with school? You want to raise your hands if you feel comfortable? Okay, significant. Okay. You have, okay. Then I want to touch upon something else that you said, Velvet, which is you said, let's go to fatigue. Fatigue wasn't on the chart. It should have been. It didn't make it up here. But you mentioned that when your son gets home from school, the only thing he wants to do is go to sleep. I think we heard some of that up at the front. Can I just get a show of hands about how many of you, even when you were a young child, had that problem with some sort of fatigue? Okay. Does someone want to describe the fatigue a little bit? Does it happen at a certain point of the day, or did you notice some sort of triggers? Someone want to share that? We'll go to the, okay. Yes, go ahead. There's a microphone coming. When you were a child.
So for me, it was literally my weight, my body felt like it was weighed down. I'm sorry, I'll stand up. My name is Jocelyn.
Yes.
I'm 28 years old, and I have sickle beta plus thalassemia. It literally felt like I couldn't get up. Like my arms and limbs would just drop. I could not roll out of bed. I couldn't move. It was that kind of fatigue, and I would sleep all day. My mom would try and wake me up, and she would wake me up to get, food and water, and I would go right back to sleep, and I would sleep hours straight. So it was really tough. I don't know if anyone else.
Mm-hmm. And what was your name again?
Jocelyn.
Jocelyn. Thank you, Jocelyn. And was this every day, Jocelyn?
No, it wasn't every day. I'm not really sure. It didn't have like a consistent pattern. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen around. It was definitely when I consider myself 100%, meaning I hadn't been in the hospital for a couple of months, or I hadn't had any pain crisis. But it was just, considered just those day-to-day issues that you have with sickle cell. I would classify it as under that.
Okay. Does anyone else feel that what Jocelyn described, did they also experience it? Just with a show of hands. How many? Okay, yeah. Yes.
The other is that percentage is so large, and I'm wondering if fatigue.
Okay. Margaret raises a good question. Margaret, you want to do co-facilitation with me? You can. How many people had put fatigue in their other? Mm-hmm. As the young people. And we'll have the same type of question for the adults. Mm-hmm. Anything that my colleagues want to ask about fatigue? Janka.
I was just wondering if fatigue had any relationship as a warning sign for a crisis, or was part of the outcome after a crisis. Just did it have any relationship, any predictive value in terms of your clinical course? I see a lot of heads nodding no.
Yeah. Okay. And I think, Alana, you had something to say about fatigue? Okay, you want to?
Oh, I was just going to touch on Velvet's concentration point. An experience I had all during college is the difference between being physically present in the class and mentally present. And you know, in college, you have a certain amount of absences you can have before they just fail you. But I was very upfront about what I had, but a lot of times I had to just be physically present and not that mentally present where I'm actually there concentrating and focusing on, you know, whatever's at hand. And then the fatigue point is a lot of times, you know, I did mention when I spoke of not being able to sleep at night. A lot of times when I'm in a crisis, especially an acute crisis and I'm in the hospital, I just want to sleep. It's that moment of peace you get when you're sleeping, that you're not in pain. So the people that I've spoken to with sickle cell, I've never heard of, you know, fatigue as a kind of I would say a coming attraction of a sickle cell disease, you know, sickle cell crisis.
So we're going to actually have to move on. So,
one question. I know this is the pediatric and young adult session, but when we get into the adult session, we have concerns that some of these, what we call patient-reported outcomes, may change over time. And so there may be the fatigue that you experience as a child or adolescent, and does it persist into adulthood? Because when we think about these measures of the effects on your life, we need to come up with good measures. And so if they're different from the pediatric and the adult perspective, we'd like to hear about that.
So I'll put a shout out. We're going to have to move on from fatigue and concentration, but please, it sounds like this is a very important and maybe not discussed very much discussed topic. So in the docket, when you submit your comment through our website, please address your issues with fatigue. We have so much we want to cover, so I'm just trying to see where we should go. I think we'll save talking about chronic pain for the comment. Send us a comment through the docket, and things like strokes and acute chest syndrome. We heard the panelists, so if you have a story that's different from that, I want to hear if there are any symptoms that are not on this list, that maybe were in your other category, that you would say are in my top two symptoms, the effects that affects my child or the young person. Anyone want to comment on something? Yes, we have.
Hello, my name is Samika. I have a 6-year-old girl, Jasmine, and one of the biggest things that I have, which is acute chest, but coming with acute chest is asthma. And Jasmine can get a cold that triggers acute chest that then goes into an asthma attack that just, you know, so for me, understanding as a parent how the lungs are really affected, and she's had a total of 4 acute chest syndromes and have been hospitalized for each one of them. But since she has been on the asthma medication and have now been placed on the singular, and we have a very aggressive treatment plan when if I hear a slight cough at all, I start the aggressive plan. It's because if I don't, the acute chest kind of rolls right into it. So the biggest thing is understanding the relationship between sickle cell and also having that asthma, which then goes into the acute chest.
I see a lot of heads nodding. A lot of agreement with this statement? Okay. Any other symptoms? Any other effects?
Sarah, perhaps we can hear from those that are on the webcast.
Oh, yes. Can we have the webcast results of that polling?
Okay, so moving through the list, very similar. We had about, except much higher percentages, similar trends. We had about 83% of the participants say that they had issues with chronic daily pain, about 25% with multiple infections, 12% with strokes, 29% with acute chest syndrome, 12% with growth problems, 7% with priapism, 7% with problems with spleen. We did break out fatigue on the web, and we had about 80% confirm that they have fatigue, 44% with difficulty concentrating, and then about 32% with other effects not listed above.
Okay, thank you. That's very informative. Thanks. Okay, we're going to tee up the phones. We're going to go to the phone lines in a few minutes, and that will give a chance for a few web participants to call in. Now, if you're on the web and you want to go to the phone, there's going to be some instructions here. And what we're looking for is if you have a symptom that hasn't been mentioned that you want to talk about. This is our second time doing the phone, so if it doesn't go exactly smoothly, then my apologies in advance, but we're going to try. So that'll be in a few minutes. Are there any other symptoms that people want to talk about? Restrictive airway, I hear. Okay, so that kind of goes with the breathing problems. Okay, we have someone in the back. And while Andrea goes to the back, I'm going to come over here. Raise your hand in the back if you wanted to come. Okay.
Hello, my name is Tara, and as a child in primary school, I had a lot of issues with stress causing sickle cell crises. Mm-hmm. So for me, during pretty much every year at final exam, I missed every final exam for like 3 years in a row. Mm-hmm. Just stressing about studying about it.
I see a lot of heads nodding. Anyone had a similar experience? You want to show your hand? Okay, looks quite common. Okay, I'm sorry, yeah. Okay, let me go over here. We have Francesca.
Hi, good morning. My name is Francesca Valentine. I live on both sides of the fence. I'm a registered nurse for 35 years. My son is 30. He'll be on the adult panel with sickle cell disease, hemoglobin SS. Silent symptoms that can be ignored during school plagued us. I didn't know he had his first silent infarction because they switched school nurses, and the new nurse hadn't looked at anything about sickle cell, so he was deemed being unruly when he was in the nurse's office with black spots in his visual field, rearranging things on the desk, sent back to class. Then he was deemed as being not paying attention and lazy when he was tired, and he could no longer spell in 4th grade what he learned to spell in 2nd grade. And he couldn't tell the time on a watch face, a regular clock, and he could before. So in the midst of labels, they missed the symptoms.
Thank you, Francesca. Did someone want to say something up here? I thought I saw a hand. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, as I work with the Sickle Cell Disease Foundation of California, I'm a former school principal, so I get a lot of these educational issues, and I tell you, they are simply awful. Just awful. From school, people not believing that the child has sickle cell disease, not believing that the child is in pain, only believing the worst about a child. And even when we would go in to have the conferences with documentation, those beliefs did not change. And so that's the added stress on the child and on the parent. One of our parents was sent to the district attorney because they were accusing her of truancy for her child, and the child's in the hospital with sickle cell crisis.
Thank you, Nancy. I heard a lot of murmurs, a lot of hands raising. There's one comment back here, I think.
Hi, my name is Maisha Pasante. Our other is very different because my children have only AS, and we were told that it doesn't have any symptoms. I have 3 children with AS. And 2 of them get very many of the same problems I'm hearing today. my first child that got those symptoms, when she would come home from school and go to sleep for hours, I thought she was just being unruly and lazy. Me, as a parent, I thought that. Because that was what I was taught, that sickle cell didn't cause problems. Sickle cell trait, AS, didn't cause problems. It took years, and until she had what was pretty much a sickle cell crisis at the age of 16, that I understood that you can have that happen with trait. And it's been very, very painful when my son, who just turned 12 yesterday, had his first crisis at the age of 10 and was sick for an entire month, and we couldn't get anybody to believe us or give him fluids. And they gave him like a little bit of morphine, like 1 milligram, and he said, "Mommy, the morphine doesn't seem to help as much as the fluids." And I could get the morphine for him easier than I could get the fluids. It was extremely painful experience. He had 12 hours of priapism. They both have terrible fatigue. They get bone pain. They have trouble breathing. In school, when he was passing out from the crisis, they said he was faking it. EMS was called to the school. The EMS person told me that, I don't think anything's really wrong with him, but his blood pressure was like 70 over palp. And then when we got to the hospital, he couldn't walk. And the doctors and nurses there told him, you can walk. There's nothing wrong with you. So I am very sad listening to all of the stories. I'm thankful that they aren't as severe, but it's also scary because we can't get treatment because we're told that AS doesn't have any problems. He missed a lot of school that April, and by the way, he's a straight A student, top of his class, skipped a grade. And my older daughter, who's here with me, she was doing great in school, then all of a sudden stopped doing well in school, and I missed it because I was told AS doesn't have symptoms. So the fatigue and the priapism were the two symptoms that were scary to me because my son didn't even tell me. And then the pediatric hematologist said, well, this isn't sickle cell. I don't know what it is, but it isn't sickle cell.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your story. We're going to have one more comment, and then we're going to go to two more comments, and then we're going to go to the web.
Hi, my name is Tina Kay, and I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. One of the things I mentor, I have sickle cell disease and I'm 40, but I mentor young ladies who are transitioning into college, and bullying is a serious issue. I've had one young lady who actually was put off of the basketball team by the coach. They wouldn't let her play volleyball. And the young ladies that played the sports with her were threatening to beat her up. Mm-hmm. So bullying is another issue. Okay. And that's why children with sickle cell disease want to hide it, because they don't want other people to know that they're different. And another thing is loss of hearing. A lot of people don't talk about the loss of hearing. It's not just vision, but the small veins that go to our eyes also go to our ears as well.
I think we'll hear about loss of vision in the next topic. Thank you for your point, Tina. We're going to have to keep going if we want to make sure we get to the adults, to hear from the adults in the room. Any quick follow-up questions from my colleagues?
I was wondering if anyone here has experienced a stroke or silent infarcts as a child and want to speak about that experience.
First, before we do that, we've got someone in the back who's been waiting a long time to talk. So we'll let that person. Yeah.
My name is Donnell. I wear multiple hats. I'm the program director for the hemoglobinopathies program at HRSA. I'm an MD, and I also have sickle cell disease. I was just going to say in the others, one thing you might want to talk about, because it does go to concentration and fatigue, is sleep disturbance. I know that, even as an adult, I haven't had a crisis in years, but I still find it hard to sleep sometimes at night. So that could be a part of that other that needs to be considered in terms of difficulty, concentration, and fatigue.
Thank you very much. Okay, now going back to Nicole's question about stroke. Okay, right here? Go ahead.
You asked about stroke as a child and silent infarcts, and I did experience that when I was younger. I was living in Indiana, where I was the only patient with sickle cell disease in the entire city I lived in, so there wasn't a great deal of education. And also, I did have the silent infarct. We've learned that the teachers, as you all have mentioned, are the best ones in a position to notice these changes. But for me, it was just considered unruly. It was considered you're just not trying hard enough, going from being a straight-A student to bringing home C's. And my mom didn't know, so no one understood. And I did have a stroke. I fell, I bumped my head, and they were saying that I was faking, and all of it wasn't. Unfortunately, I had a physician that was confident enough in herself and her ability to acknowledge that she didn't know anything about sickle cell and to contact those that did. So even before the study came out that blood transfusion helps with the chronic transfusion will stop a lot of that stroke, they put me on chronic transfusion to slow down some of those infarcts I was experiencing.
Thank you, Lakia. Okay. So I think we get one more, and then I really want to get to the folks on the phone. So this is our last comment in person for the pediatric. Go ahead.
I'm speaking on behalf of my son, who's 25. When he was young, had a series of silent infarcts, culminating with a pretty major stroke when he was 9. One particular time it was precipitated after traveling on a plane, and he arrived and was having slurred speech and weakness on one side. We had a bad experience. We're going to an ED. We weren't believed that he was suffering from anything. And after 45 minutes, when hydration had not started, we stormed out and went to another hospital where he had an exchange transfusion for 6 straight hours. He ultimately, to this day, still has difficulty with walking without assistance and takes a number of meds to control seizure activity. And it was eventually treated for the moya condition with a type of surgery to correct the occluded carotid arteries with replacing, temporal veins so that they would reperfuse his brain from the top down.
Thank you. Are you John? What's your name?
My name is Bill Cummings.
Bill. Okay. So as we go, I'm so sorry we can't get to all of the pediatric. We will be able to touch upon the treatments for pediatric patients in the afternoon. But I hope this gives you motivation to write to us and submit a comment telling us your full story. As the people, we're going to have a web summary first of some of the comments, and I'm going to ask for the panel 1, the pediatric panelists to step down, and for the adult panelists to come up. Again, pediatric panelists, thank you so much. And James, can we have just a sampling of, or Pajita, a sampling of the symptoms mentioned?
Hello. So we've gotten a lot of comments on the web, and I'll just summarize and mention a few of them. Some participants have mentioned jaundice, fatigue related to menstrual cycle. So she's noted that it's gotten worse during her menstrual cycles, which we have not heard in the room. And some problems with eyesight and avascular necrosis.
Thank you very much.
And I'll just note one other thing, that many comments have talked about the stress and depression resulting from pain and symptoms.
Thank you. Okay. We just have a time for 1 or 2 phone comments. I'll just ask on the phone, just in the interest of time, just to keep your comments brief and focused on a symptom a health effect that you haven't heard mentioned today, or one that very much bothers you. Do we have the phone? Do we have our next caller?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Marquita Gaines. I'm tuning in from Georgia right now, and I'm 21 years old, but I did want to just let the parents of the adolescents know that it is important important to address the physical symptoms, and I actually talked to my doctor about how you can change the hospital environment, but because the turnover with ER doctors and students in training is so quick that the sensitivity and the care that you receive in the ER is, I guess, a little more cold and not as caring and comforting as it could be. When I was younger, I did have, the problem with being in advanced classes, but missing so much school that, like Alana said, the seat time hours that you were required, you could have an A, but they would fail you because you weren't there. And I think it's important to talk to the children about, how they're not alone, and it's okay to feel confused because you know you're capable, but your body won't let you. And even now that I'm in college, I deal with that. And it's just important that we support each other and listen to the younger kids, because as far as sports and socially, I would just want them to know that it does get better.
Marquita, thank you. You might not be able to see this, but I see a few moms nodding their heads in agreement here on your excellent point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One more phone comment. Yeah. Oh, pardon me? Oh, operator, can we have the next caller? They have to train me for this.
Sorry, it's Amarilla?
Yeah.
Yes. Your line is Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Amarilla?
Hi, how are you? I'm Amarilla, and I'm calling from West Hartford, Connecticut. My daughter Anne-Marie is 4 years old, and she lives with SS. As I've been waiting here, listening to everything, so many people have brought up the points that I wanted to kind of just touch base on, which were asthma and its relation to acute chest syndrome, which my daughter has been diagnosed with asthma, as well as the sleeping patterns, which affect her as well. And because of them, she has had her, because of her irregular sleeping pattern, she has had her adenoids and her tonsils removed. And it has helped, but it has not helped enough because it's still affecting her. And also, some people have brought up the loss of hearing, which I'm a little bit amazed to, start hearing about. I didn't know that it could happen at such a young age, and I feel like as of recently, my daughter has kind of been complaining about not being able to hear. But I think that it's totally amazing that this public meeting is taking place, because so many of us have such diverse stories, and to kind of hear them all in one, I myself, listening to the panel, listening to everyone's personal stories, have been taken aback with so much emotion, and I'm sitting here crying because I'm just like, oh my God, I'm not alone. But I do look forward to hearing more about the relationship between asthma, breathing, sleeping patterns, and, as well, my daughter has a lot of allergies, so that kind of makes it difficult as well. So I'm just looking forward to hear more about the relation of them all.
Great. Thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you for, allowing us to be able to call in. This is amazing, and I wish that I could be there physically, but I'm glad that I was able to call in.
Okay, we'll call this experiment a success.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then with that, we're going to move into the next topic and focus on adults. I think there's been some overlap. So what we're going to do is focus on things, how your condition has changed since your adolescent and young years. We have 4 excellent panel members to share their stories. I think I'm going to step back at the podium. I'll relinquish my microphone. I'm going to come back up here and let the panelists speak for themselves. Again, keep it to a couple minutes. We are going to be running short on time, so 2 to 3 minutes, and I will nudge you along if I have to. And I can't wait to get started. Who wants to start first? Marcus or George? Oh, fine. Let's have Marcus start. Let's let the young one start. Just hit the right button.
Hello. Hi, my name is Marcus Valentine. I am 30 years old, and I've been living with sickle cell hemoglobin SS for all these years. This is my mom next to me. I'm from Illinois, and we came out here for the panel discussion on topics that are concerning the sickle cell. And, you know, for the first half of my life, I was just kind of wanting to be normal, and I heard the stories from the mothers of the pediatric people who were just up. They were similar. I was similar to that. And so if your children, which they sound like they have the strength I do, will get to where they should be, and that's doing something for the illness to further advance our survival and well-being. But I am very happy to talk about the effects that sickle cell has on me in my daily life, which I have heart failure from it and the fatigue. And there's something that just developed with me, which is wounds, sort of like diabetic ulcer wounds that I just developed on my ankles. And it was, at first it was new because all the treatments that I get for my, when I go into a crisis usually help. And, you know, I have a set plan and it helps out, but the thing is that I'm going through now, it's kind of like a different, the treatments that usually work and are successful are helping, but only to a certain point. And so I was happy to hear that the FDA is having this conference about sickle cell and, you know, possibly developing a drug so that we have something there, something extra, and something that's kind of our own that can help us, you know, get through life, our daily life, without, you know, these long pauses. Because when you get sick, it's like you have to just stop everything you're doing just to recover. So I hope that some of what I say today can help further, you know, getting us to that next step. But, yeah, you can, my mom's gonna talk for me because I'm not feeling too well today, so.
I'm going to help him if that's okay.
That's fine.
He developed wounds. We had a flood. He got a scratch. It developed into a chronic non-healing ulcer. Swelling, sickling to the surface of the skin, and his tiny microvascular system. So what you would do for, say, a diabetic or someone with, you know, other types of wounds, those don't all work for these sickle wounds. We learned early on, you can't put him in compression. That's going to make it worse and cause more constriction. And the standard wound care, we have excellent wound care, but it's not enough. Everything has to go together, and there is no quick fix to this. The right one healed, it reopened. The left one developed cellulitis and had to be surgically debrided. So wounds are a very debilitating complication on the lower limbs because you still need to walk to get where you have to go, and they're painful and require a lot of care. And I think he said to me right after he got out of the hospital, he said, you know, I almost rather have him take these feet and be done from above the wound and call it a day, because he said, I'm so tired of this, of all my complications, which included acute chest, ventilation, exchange, osteonecrosis. The list is very long. I won't even try to give it to you. But of all of this, he thinks the wounds, hands down, have really caused the biggest problem for him.
And then I started a film about sickle cell, and I just wanted to put that out there to let people know that you're not alone, and you should never be afraid to talk about this illness, because that's how we advance and progress. We have to talk about it, because for such a long time I hid all of that. I didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to deal with it, but the moment I started, it's what made me feel better, and I was able to see the change in other sicklers. So
you know.
And one more thing, I applaud him. His wound is on Facebook. And with the progression and what we're doing and anything we find to help make it better, it'll be on Facebook. With a website for evidence-based, proven from the physicians. We are physicians at Edwards Hospital in Naperville, and our colleagues from University of Illinois in Chicago. The collaboration is phenomenal. I'm a registered nurse, so I'm hoping through teaching future nurses, we need to bust a hole in the stereotype wall, because while they're worrying about stereotypes and faking, we're dying.
Thank you, Fran. And thank you, Marcus. You've got a great young advocate on your hands here. I think we're going to move on and have Helen. And Helen has, oh no, I'm sorry, we'll have Anthony. Anthony, nice to meet you. I didn't meet you.
I do apologize.
Nope, just push your little red button.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm actually speaking on topic 2. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. So,
You can come in the afternoon. Can you come back in the afternoon?
Yeah, I'll be here all day.
Okay.
But
Okay.
So I'll pass it on.
All
to
right, then
Helen,
we'll have
you later.
We'll have Helen.
Hello, I'm Helen. I'm 38 years old. I have sickle cell disease SS. I'm a mother to 2 twin girls, ages 5. So I have this speech here that I've been working on. But after being here and hearing all the stories, I feel like there's so much that I can add and not go over time. So I'm just going to say that I've had my spleen removed, my gallbladder removed. I have avascular necrosis in both of my hips, and I'm now starting to feel symptoms in my 2 shoulders. I've had problems with my eyes. I have a herniated disc, and I'm also being followed for pulmonary hypertension. The symptoms that matter the most to me is the things that affect adults: sickling the cells, bone damage, obviously death. But I'll tell you a little bit more about the road to becoming a mother. I never thought I would be a mother. It never crossed my mind. They told me that I would not live to be an adult. But at 32, I decided to give it a try. I stopped taking hydroxyurea. I had 7 major crises. I also had sickling in the placenta, intense bone pain, and the swelling made it difficult for me to make it to my doctor's appointments, as well as birthing. My doctors came to me and said that I needed to have a selective abortion. Obviously, I was devastated, because the idea that my body was malfunctioning and causing my baby's distress was too much for me to bear. My doctors decided that I should have an exchange transfusion, and I was able to carry my babies to 36 weeks and 4 days. The day that my daughters were born, I felt that I had conquered sickle cell disease. Mm-hmm. 5 years later, I am still reminded how happy I was that day. Present day, as their mother, it's very difficult for me. I have intense bone pain, not crisis pain, intense bone pain that is due to the complication of sickle cell disease. Most of my days are spent lying in bed, unable to get out of bed. My husband has to get me out of bed, while my daughters help me put on my shoes. I'm often late taking them to school because I'm just having a lot of pain. Again, not crisis pain, but pain due to complications. Herniated disc came at a time when my career as a pastry chef was advancing. I was able to go to my dream school and graduate with a lot of difficulties, but I made it. So of course, when I was told that I could not be a chef anymore, I said to my doctor, what do you want me to do now? Because I nearly died getting here. And he told me to get a new career. I tried the new career and it did not work for me. I went from not having a crisis in 3 years into constantly having a crisis. I am unable to work because of complications, I cannot sit or stand for a short period of time without experiencing intense bone pain. It's hard because I'm a very outgoing person. I'm happy, but I suffer on a daily basis. Again, not because of crisis pain, but because of complications. I have a hard time concentrating. I should also say that I have a learning disability. I was diagnosed, I think, in junior high school, but I was diagnosed for sickle cell disease so that I could have accommodations, so that I can be able to take the cheese bus. So I never properly learned how to read until I taught myself at the age of 20. I always knew that I was smart, but I couldn't understand why I could not retain information or organize my thoughts or get my brain and my fingers and my eyes and my mouth to all kind of work together so that I could form a sentence. When I decided that I wanted to go to culinary school, I decided to seek help and I got tested. I remember the psychologist who tested me said, you know, your test scores does not reflect who you are because the numbers, they don't match. I've just met you, but I'm not understanding what's going on. And I don't know that much about sickle cell disease, but I think that years of you having these crises and these little tiny blood vessels that is affecting every organ in your body, including your brain, because at the time I did not know the difference, that could be the reason why you're having so much problem retaining information, paying attention in school, and just remembering conversations that you just had. So that made a big difference for me. And that taught me that I had to, A, accept my learning disability, because it was a big deal for me, and 2, learn everything that I could about sickle cell disease and not hide. Once I did that, I learned how to study. I learned what my learning style was, and I learned to bring others into my life with sickle cell disease. In college, my father dropped me off, and he gave me $100, and he said, this is all the money that I'm going to give to you, and you have to support yourself. Within minutes after my dad left me, I had the worst crisis that I could remember as an adult. It was an acute chest syndrome. Mind you, I had just been dropped off, so I didn't have time to make connections with roommates and friends, and here I was screaming on the floor, begging for someone to help me. That was my first recurrence of acute chest as an adult. It really felt like I was going to die. I had never experienced anything like that before. So I had to, I guess, come out of my shell, not be scared, and invite people into my life with this disease. And once I did that, I got a lot of responses that I never thought I would get. The compassion, the willingness to learn, the support. In college, I missed, I can't even tell, I think I X'd out 7 times. And that basically means that I would leave and stay away for 4 weeks because I missed 3 days of school. Because the program was so vigorous and intense, there was no way how you could miss days. But I kept on coming back. And every time I was paying for that. I managed to graduate culinary school. I got my degree. Held a job for 3 long years, the longest time I've ever held a job, and then was diagnosed with AVN. So when I was diagnosed with AVN and didn't know what I was going to do with myself and couldn't get out of bed, could not work, I decided to have a family, and then I had my twins. So as their mother, it's difficult. Like I said, they have to help me put on my shoes. You know, there are days when I hurt so bad, they say to me, "Mommy, are you hurting today?" And I'll say yes. Okay, I'm so not going to cry. And I'll say yes. And they'll say to me, "You know, I'm so sorry for you because you are the best mommy in the world, and tomorrow will be better." And tomorrow, it does get better. But it gets better because I get out of bed. As painful as it is, I get out of bed. I have no choice. I have to function. I have to take care of them. On a daily basis, I cannot take pain meds because I need to be present and be able to raise my kids. My husband works to support us, as well as support this endeavor that I have to tell my story and to help others. So I can't be on pain meds and not be able to function. So I've had to find other ways to deal with the pain.
Helen, we'll be talking about the treatments in the afternoon, so make sure you hold those thoughts and share them then.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other final thoughts you want to say?
Okay, wait, so I talked about bone pain, avascular necrosis, and how it affects me, right? Okay. Pulmonary hypertension, sickling in the placenta. I've talked about problems with my eyes and my learning disability that I really believe that is because of years of sickling. Having a learning disability is so frustrating. You know, not being able to concentrate, not being able to organize my thoughts the way that I want to is really challenging for me. And just knowing that I have so much that I want to do with my life, and sickle cell really is not my story. You know, it's just this road, this obstacle that's it's keeping me from my story, my real path. You know, I met these two women today, Margaret and Olga. They are like my dream because they are living their lives, and I want to live that long. I want to be able to do the things that they've done, and they talked to me for like 10 minutes, and I have more hope than I did yesterday.
And Helen, we'll be learning from Olga in the afternoon. I'm going to wrap it up then and move on to the next person. Is that okay?
Yes. Thank you very much.
And we'll have Terry, please.
Hello. I'm going to try to stay on task with my little thing that I wrote here. I'm 30 years old and I'm living with sickle cell SC. I am what one would call a healthy sickle cell patient. I would say I'm healthy because I don't take daily meds and I'm not in crisis often. Most people who know anything about the disease are usually surprised when I say I have it. The effects of sickle cell disease that have the greatest impact on my life is the pain crisis, tiredness, and depression. I live with constant pain sometimes, and my tolerance for pain is significant. The meds given for pain have real side effects, and it includes possible dependency, hallucinations, and the dreadful detox. The sweats, the chills, the tossing and turning while trying not to take the meds in order to avoid dependency, all while still being in pain. Once coming off the meds, I thought that a gang attacked and killed my mother. But later I found out she was alive. I'm always tired, and it's like someone said earlier, it's this heaviness that comes over your body, and it's like you just need to lay there. You just don't want to move. And there are things I would like to do, but I just can't because I'm just too tired. I have to make myself get up and get ready for the day. Sometimes it just feels better to lay down in the bed and not do anything. Once I get moving, I like to keep moving, so it's no time for me to think about me being tired. And unlike my colleagues, I'm an attorney, so unlike most of them, they can just keep working. I can't work constantly and forget to drink and just go. I always think about my health, so I don't have a crisis. I stay hydrated. Depression sets in after I've been sick, and I'm not able to live normally. When I get sick, even a minor crisis, it just reminds me of the extra precautions I have to live by. Being a healthy sickle cell patient, quote unquote, my daily life is normal, quote unquote. However, there are periods of time when I live with pain every single day. I'm constantly aware of the changes in temperature and the weather, no matter what the season, because it's always too cold. Summertime, it's too cold inside. Wintertime, it's too cold outside. And the cold, when the cold gets into your bones, it's just like serious pain. One time, my friend, she threw some cold water on my back as a joke, and I was hot, and it left me in the bed for 2 days with a pain crisis. So there's no such thing as a normal day, but I try to make it as normal as possible. The worst pain crisis I ever had was in 2003, and it would be about 10 years before I had another one like that. I was a sophomore in undergrad, and I was laying in my bed and I couldn't move. I went to the hospital and got released, and I did everything real slow until a few days later, I was back in the hospital, and I didn't leave for a month. I received 7 blood transfusions, I had kidney failure, lung failure, and I was intubated. I actually celebrated my 20th birthday in the hospital, all which was told to me because I was highly sedated and couldn't remember hardly anything. When I left the hospital, I had to learn how to walk again. I was a semester behind in school. I was trying to get along with life and feeling okay for a little bit after the crisis. And then I was hit with the fact that I had osteonecrosis of the hip from the medicine that they gave me to help clear up my lungs. And I ended up having a full right hip replacement at the age of 21. And I also ended up in therapy. I had been walking with a cane for a whole year before that. So I was upset because it was a whole year before a doctor wouldn't dismiss my pain as just a pain crisis, and actually just gave me an MRI to find that my pelvic bone had crushed my hip bone. Now, as I'm a mature young adult, my health has become more of an issue for me. I have a huge fear of living alone. I would like to buy a house and move out, but it's scary because I've never lived alone. I've always had a roommate, someone who can make sure that I was okay. And although I'm capable mentally, I'm afraid to work alone, which would be really nice to do when you can't get a job that you want. I don't want to work alone because I feel like I'll leave my work stranded. If I get sick, there's no telling how long I could be out. I feel like I'll set myself up for failure by the mere fact of being the only employee in my business. And furthermore, I don't like telling people about my illness, even when I work with a company, because one, I look healthy on the outside, so people don't really get how or why I'm sick. After explaining what it is, people still don't get it. And people treat you differently, and it's not always in a bad way, but it makes you feel a little uncomfortable, like, yes, I'm okay, or don't, you know. But the thing that's worst of all is that I need to tell people, because there are days that I really just don't feel well, and it's due solely to my sickle cell symptoms. I'm looking forward to having a family one day, and as I grow older, I'm worried about carrying a baby with sickle cell. I know I will be a high-risk pregnancy. I know healthy people who have had rough pregnancies, so in being a sickle cell patient, questions come to mind. Will I be healthy enough to carry a baby? Will I be on bed rest the entire pregnancy? How will it affect my baby if I have a crisis while I'm pregnant? Will I be well enough after I deliver to take care of my baby and do simple things like breastfeed? My concern for infants and young children is the fact that I don't think people are being diagnosed early enough because doctors don't look for sickle cell symptoms. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 11, and it was a total accident. And my first real crisis wasn't until I was 19. For all ages, I worry about the care that sickle cell patients receive. In medical school, I have 2 friends who are doctors. There's not much taught about sickle cell. And once you go to the hospital where they're unfamiliar with your case and your disease, doctors always ask you, so what do you do? What you, and the sad fact is you probably know better than they do. However, when dealing with a pain crisis, it can be hard to focus on a plan of action for your care when you went to the ER to get help. I fear that the meds will just get stronger and there will be no search for a cure. I fear that it will always remain that sickle cell patients will not be able to get health care or life insurance policies. I fear that young patients will get pressured into taking medicine that they're not sick enough to take. Like when I was having issues with my right leg, they tried to pressure me into taking hydroxyurea, which was way too strong for me, and I wasn't quote unquote sick enough to take it. It would do more harm to me than good. So I can only hope that sickle cell patients are strong enough to know that they do have choices and to question and ask about their plan of treatment. That's all.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you. And finally, we have George.
My name is George Harris Carter. I'm 68 years old and I suffer with sickle beta thalassemia 0. Today I would like to represent myself and members of Sickle Cell Association of Richmond Oscar as its administrator, and the patients within the 9 chapters of Sickle Cell Chapters of Virginia, where I also serve as administrator. Problems associated with sickle cell disease include pain, which some people live with every single day, chest syndrome, anemia, fatigue, infections, breathing trouble, pneumonia, stroke, gallstones, organ and tissue damage, spleen and kidney dysfunction, complications during pregnancy, jaundice, leg ulcers, hand-foot syndrome, swollen hands and feet that become hot, red, and painful, vision problems, blood in the urine, slowed growth and delayed puberty in children, primism or painful erections in men. Sickle cell often creates a need for hip replacements and or shoulder replacements. We may develop pulmonary hypertension. Loss of hearing is not listed in most publications. I've lost 80% of the hearing in my left ear and 30% in my right ear. Some years ago, during a sickle cell presentation by Dr. Wally Smith, who's here today, he mentioned that hearing loss was a problem. I stated that I had hearing loss in my left ear. 2 other males said that they had hearing loss in their left ear also. Only 4 studies have been presented on hearing loss, and 2 of those by Dr. Smith. Dental problems also occur. Our nurse practitioner recently wrote, "Sickle cell disease has a great impact on oral hygiene. We have patients as young as in their 30s that have dentures, have lost all of their teeth because of damage from lacks of oxygenated blood and sickling in the microvasculature. I have suffered from 14 of the above 23 problems. In addition to the sickle cell, I have asthma, bronchitis, a hernia, 2 stomach ulcers, deteriorating rotator cuff in both shoulders, and now an inflamed stomach, which in part is from the use of ibuprofen as for pain and inflammation as a result of that sickle cell. When I have a sickle cell crisis, the pain keeps me from sleeping. I'm too tired to do some of my activities. The pain also limits my concentration and my mobility. Where in my body the pain is also determines how much I can do and how mobile I am. On the worst day, a level 10 pain crisis, I will be in the hospital trying to get enough pain and medication, IV fluids, and oxygen to get through the pain. There is no other activity I can engage in on these days. The pain has complete control to the point that 3 times in my life I prayed to God to let me die because I didn't think I could take any more pain. Medical staff will often, on a scale of 1 to 10, want to know what your pain level is. Using that same scale in terms of my activities, if I have a level 2 pain, I can probably go about my regular activities on a scale of 8 or 80%. If I have a pain level of 4, then I can probably go about my regular activities on a scale of 6 or 60%. If I have a level 6 pain, I can probably go about my regular activities on a scale of 4 or 40%, and so on. I worry about further hearing loss and organ damage and having a stroke. But hearing loss is one, because if I virtually cannot hear in my left ear. I always keep my wife on my right side so I know what she's telling me. 30% I've lost on my right side. If I lose any more, the TV's going to be up so loud she's going to leave home. So I can't afford that. But I'm 68 years old, and one of the ladies in our support group is 75. We have overcome. So let that be a lesson to those who are younger, who wonder. You can live, you can survive, you can enjoy life, and to God be the glory for all that we have.
Thank you, George, and a sincere thank you to all the panelists. We are not on our schedule at all. So, with your permission and the permission of the panel of everyone, we're going to go about 15 minutes into lunch. I don't think anyone here is going to mind too much, right? The lunch isn't that great anyway, the kiosk. Anyway, so we're going to have an abbreviated discussion, and our panelists, they had complicated stories, and it was really unfair to ask them to stick to 2 to 3 minutes. But I hope, I'm going to get a raise of hands. How many of you felt that your experience was shared by one of the panel members? They shared a wide variety. How many felt that you saw a lot of your experience in there, in theirs? That's great. Okay, we might not be able to get into all of the topics that we want to for today, but share your stories through the docket. Let's put up the one polling question that we have. This will help a lot. It's the same polling question that we asked the pediatric group. So this is only for the adults if you're about 23 or older. Other than an acute pain crisis, because we know that would be in your top, probably, what health effects of sickle cell disease have the greatest effect on your life? Or your loved one's life if you're here for someone else. Chronic daily pain, stroke, acute chest syndrome, fatigue, priapism, or painful erection. Problems with eyesight from sickle cell disease, damage to heart or pulmonary hypertension, kidney disease or gallstones, or something else not listed above. Okay. Are there going to be symptoms? We want to hear more about that. Okay, has everyone had a chance? Can we go to the results? Okay, yes. We thought that the others not listed above would be pretty high. But it looks like our number one is fatigue. I don't think we're going to get into that because we did discuss it a lot for the adolescents. So the second highest in the in-person is the chronic daily pain. And that has been eloquently shared by our panel members. So we won't get into that symptom as well. Next, I have to squint to see the problems with eyesight. But the next highest one is the problems with eyesight from sickle cell disease. And then, of course, we have the other category. So what I think my colleagues would really like to know now is let's tease apart. We have a limited amount of time, so let's tease apart that other symptoms that you would put in your top 3. Oh, before we do that, on the web, does it look about the same?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, it looks about the same. The highest on the web is actually for chronic daily pain at 85%, and then next we have fatigue at 79%.
Okay, thank you. And on the web, keep sending in your comments about your symptoms. So that other. Does someone want to share another symptom that they would put maybe even in their top 2, since time is tight? Okay, right here. I'm just going to come over here. If you could state your name.
Teresa Murphy from New York City. I'm also 68, and sometimes ignorance is bliss because I didn't even know I had all these problems. But I think my most defining problems, and lately it's been hypertension, is extreme pain in my right calf, which is symbolic of getting embolisms, pulmonary embolisms. And I think that it is so striking, it feels like someone has taken a baseball bat and just beat your legs in. But I tell you, ignorance is bliss, because I had it for many, many years. And my youngest kids, I have 4 kids. I was told I was going to die by the time I was 16. I tell you, ignorance is bliss. When I saw my hematologist after I had the twins, I said, thank God that I had tubal ligation, because I would have about 20 kids now. So don't believe a lot of stuff, but it's definitely, I just see so many people in worse shape than me with other diseases that I'm so glad I made 68 years old.
Thank you, Teresa. Oh, we have another symptom here and over here. Okay, got a couple hands raised.
Hi, my name is Judy Gray Johnson, and I have the SC disease. I'm a retired school teacher. And first of all, I'd like to thank FDA and this panel over here for being here and attempting to do something for us. This is a very complicated disease. It's hereditary. Quite often when we go to the medical profession, we are made to feel like, well, maybe there's something we could have done or should have done before we got there. We didn't have any choice in this. And so we're here having to deal with whatever the symptoms are. I looked around the room here. I'm 71 years old, and let me say this. And I'm thinking, there's not many people in here that can relate to me, because 71, having the experiences of a rural community, in which there are very few blacks, and I was the lone child in the community with something strange. And have you heard of liniment? That was what the first 5 years of my life, I was treated with warm towels, just let the water run and all, and also for a poor background. And then from 5 until 16, I was treated with liniment. The doctor would just say, splash it on me and that's it. So how did I make it to here? The pain just wore off. Every year, but I did not talk about it. I learned over the years not to talk about it. And because I said, who's going to understand? Who's going to know? Who's going to understand? Who can help me? I wanted so badly for someone to help me. When finally I got, as time went on, I started thinking, I've got to write a book because nobody is going to believe me. I wrote one book, Living with Sickle Cell Disease, The Struggle to Survive, and that is our experiences here. Afterwards, I thought, wait a minute, I've got more to say. And that is, I wrote my second book, which will be out at the end of this month, Resilience. And I would like to ask that FDA, at least the panel members, read the books, and then I want you to put it on your desk as a reminder of every time you make decisions or you're planning activities or whatever for sickle cell disease patients. This would be a constant reminder of what it's really like, and maybe is there something else I should be doing. And my website is www.judygrayjohnson.com.
Thank you very much, Judy. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So over here we have some symptoms to talk. Here, I got it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm from Richmond. My name is Citrina, and I was diagnosed at 42. But I have sickle thalassemia. But one of the symptoms that I really think I struggle with the most is stress, which increases my blood pressure, which increases my stress and mobility issues. I have a hip replacement, and now I'm having a lot of pain in my shoulders, and that just, again, increases the stress and the hypertension.
Thank you so much. Okay, right here. We'll go here, and then we'll go over on that side of the room to the gentleman.
Hi, my name is Camila Bailey. I have sickle cell anemia with beta plus thalassemia, and the symptoms that I experience in the other category are sleeplessness, where my mind is awake, but my physical body is extremely tired. And I cannot reconcile my mind with my body in order to get a good night's rest. And that, and prolonged, that going over several weeks or several months, it puts me into depression because I feel like I'm never going to come out of this pattern. And so the medications for sleep medications and pain medications, and on top of all that medication is just, it's difficult to function. So the sleeplessness and the inability to reconcile my mental fatigue with my physical fatigue and get the rest I need.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We had a gentleman over in the middle.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ibrahim Carbo, and I've been living with sickle cell for 27 years. And I'm going to be honest with the audience. Until about 2 years ago, I actually stayed away from sickle cell support groups. I stayed away from, anybody who wanted to talk to me about some of these symptoms of sickle cell disease because I was scared. Who wants to hear that they may not make it past the age of 18? Who wants to hear that they may not be able to have children? And who wants to hear that they will not be able to graduate college because they have sickle cell disease, something that they had no control over? And one of the symptoms or consequences that I have experienced with sickle cell disease is not being able to spend time with my friends and family. I can deal with the pain. I go home, take my oxycodone, my Dilaudid, the Tylenol, call it a day. If I have pain that I can't handle, I go to the ER. I can deal with the pain. It's really the social aspects of sickle cell disease that's cutting deep into my soul. Not being able to take the person I am with to dinner because my joints are aching.
Thank you.
That's really what I go through with
Thank you.
sickle cell disease.
And I hope that you're hearing in here that you can make it past 18, you can't go to school, you can't have children. So it's an inspiring message from all of us here. Are there, pardon me, do we have web summaries? Okay, and I want to, let's see, I'm going to tee up for one phone call, one lucky phone person to talk about a symptom that they haven't heard. Please keep it to a symptom that you haven't heard described today. And we're going to go with a summary of what we've heard on the web.
Okay, so we've been putting together a list of symptoms that fit into that other category, and we've received a lot of comments, so
Great.
we'll try to run
Thank
through
you,
them
Web.
quickly. One we received is issues related to pregnancy, such as miscarriages and ectopic pregnancy, gout, sinusitis, allergies, mental effects, several comments about insomnia, migraines, teeth issues, severe ear infection leading to hearing loss, brain aneurysm, ulcers, and jaundice.
Okay, thank you. I heard a lot of echoes of that. Is that a list that you in the room agree with? Raise your hand if you heard your own symptoms in there. Great. Okay, before going to the phone, colleague. Pardon me? Okay, yes. Okay.
Hi, my name is Nikki Peterson. I'm 40 years old. Hemoglobin SS. I've had 4 strokes and 2 TIAs. One of the symptoms that I've suffered with is compressor fractures in my back. I have compressor fractures T1 through T5 and L4 level. And that has really been a problem that I've suffered with for the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years. And each time I get a compressor fracture, I have to start all over with rehab, with learning how to walk, and sometimes with speech. And also one of the problems I've had as a female is going through menopause at an early age, being 20 years old and having a crisis in my ovaries and my uterus and going through menopause and not being able to have children. And that's been one of the symptoms that I've suffered with. It's not only physically a physical problem, but it's also an emotional problem, being a young woman who would love to have children one day, but I'm not able to. So that's one of the problems that I go through.
Thank you so much. Okay. Any symptoms that my colleagues any final questions for my colleagues?
I just wanted to touch on retinopathy in particular, since it was close to 30%, if anyone wanted to touch on retinopathy.
Okay. Okay, back there. Whoop. And if you could just state your name again, please.
Carol from New Jersey.
Okay.
I have sickle cell retinopathy. Oh, I have so many surgery on my eyes. Actually, my mom lost her vision in her left eye, and she died from complications to pulmonary embolism. But about 3 times I almost lost my vision. I was at work one day and I saw this big black circle in my left eye, and the circle got bigger. I had no clue what it was. And because I work in occupational health, I went to the clinic to ask the doctor what was happening. And they rushed me to the hospital right away. And then they told me there was so much blood in my eye, they couldn't do anything. The doctor sent me home, and I slept upside down for like 2 nights. And then I went back and had surgery. And they had to coagulate so many vessels, and at least it saved my sight, so I can see now. But I have tremendous problems with my eyes. But one of the issues that was never discussed there, when growing up in Jamaica, I did not know I had sickle cell. I found out I had sickle cell when I was 25 years old. And as a child, I had severe pains in my mouth. And it felt like neuralgia, and I lost half of my teeth because they were trying to figure out how my teeth look well, but I was having this pain. They didn't know where the pain was from. So they took half my teeth out. But I still have this pain up to this day. And the pain would start in my mouth, go up into my ears, into my head. So whenever it gets cold, like anything below 0, I do not go outside because I end up with that pain. So there are other things too, but I won't go through that.
Thank you so much. Okay, and do we have one phone comment? Operator? Hello?
Nikki's line is open.
Nikki?
Hello.
Hi, Nikki. This is Sarah. Do you have a comment?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I had the phone put down for a second. I had a comment in regards. By the way, I'm 25 years old, and I was diagnosed with sickle cell when I was 5 months old, which is pretty young. But some of my struggles that I have really bad is I was diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension when I was around 20, and it has taken a devastating toll on my life, period. I have to have oxygen all the time, being that, with sickle cell, you're already, your cells are already oxygen deprived. So I have to have oxygen with me everywhere that I go, all the time, and being 25 years old, that's really difficult in itself. I've had a thoracotomy, my lungs burst completely in the hospital. I've also had my gallbladder removed and my spleen, and that was all before I was seen. So my life has been a big struggle with sickle cell. Day in and day out, I am extremely tired, exhausted. Some days I can't even get out of bed. And I live in Florida, and there's a lot of weather. A lot of people think that it doesn't get cold here, but it gets really cold here too. And our weather changes. So just vastly, like the other day, I went to a Super Bowl party and it was 80 degrees, and now it's very difficult. It's cold. So my body, I also look that my body literally doesn't get to adjust to the weather change. So today I'm like having a lot of pain because the weather just drastically changed within, a day or so.
Thank you very much for that comment, Nikki. And one final thing.
My final thing would just be, I definitely have fears and worries in regards to my sickle cell, but just watching and listening to the comments that have been said today, I am so proud to actually be here and be able to listen to people that have actually made it thus far. I was told I was not going to make it past 9 years old, and I'm 25 now. So it really gives me hope, and I think it gives all of us hope to let us know that we can make it further than what is expected. Definitely.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. I think that is a perfect comment to end before lunch. I know everyone didn't get a chance to speak. There's still another topic coming up in the afternoon. We're going to take 45 minutes for lunch, if that's okay. So please come back at 1:30 and we will have our topic 2 discussion. And if you have any questions, come find us. Thank you.